This formula tells us at least three things. One is how much we pay for LLM services in today's world. The second is that there is a conflict of interest. And the third is that actually there is no commercial interest in making a really good AI or AGI or how you want to call it. So let's take it one by one. First of all, this looks fair and square, right? We buy tokens, what these LLMs churn out, and the more we buy, the more we pay. It's like apples, right? You buy more apples, you pay more for the apples. But there is one major difference. What about rotten apples? How does that work? I mean, you would never buy knowingly rotten apple, and even if you buy one, you would probably take it back and tell it, hey, this is rotten apple, give me my money back, right? Does that work the same way with tokens? This is the story of No Pressure, the AI native, tiny little website system. Hello, I'm TeeAy. I've been building software for over 20 years, and I have also done management consulting, so these questions really interest me from the business perspective as well. So let's dive in a bit more. This is the basic formula, and even if you are on a subscription, which is essentially a take or pay contract, you have an allocated quota, so whether you use your quota or not, you still pay the same, but the company would have worked out how many tokens it's willing to give you for that price, and so that's your monthly subscription. Let's dissect this a bit more. So firstly, you have input tokens and you have output tokens. Input tokens are what you give the LLM, and those have usually another price, a lower price, than the output tokens, which are generated by the LLM. So this means that what you control, how many tokens you put into the system, has the lower price, and what they control, the output tokens, that's more expensive. Now, the price per output token is variable, right? So depending on what generation of model you are using or what model level. So for example, you would have the 5th generation Claude models, and Fable is more expensive than Opus, which is more expensive than Sonnet, etc. And then you also have priority, right? So if you are on a take or pay monthly contract, you would have lower priority than regular payers of per token pricing, and so you might not get access to the models as quickly on a peak period than the others. Now, vendors don't have complete freedom of pricing the tokens because there is some level of competition. We are in an oligopoly. We have several vendors, not many, and therefore they have pretty strong market power on their end, but still they cannot go wildly out of whack from the other providers. So we have some level of market pressure. So far, we have been looking at this from our own perspective, from the customer's perspective. How does it look like if you are on Anthropic's or OpenAI's side? If you look at this same equation, what you would see is that you have the pricing lever. A lever is something that you can change and that would impact your revenues. And you have the number of tokens lever. Now, you don't really have much influence on the input tokens, although you could configure your CLI agent or something like that to push more, but it's in the low price category. In the high price category, you have a lot more control because how many tokens your system generates is really under your control. Now, this is then what's called a conflict of interest, because you as a customer, you would want the minimal number of output tokens, just what gets your job done. They, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, they want to give you as many tokens as possible at the high price range, because that makes their revenues go up. Now let's see what's inside the number of output tokens. How can we figure out what goes in there, and how can we increase the number of output tokens that we are selling? As any business, they want to increase their revenues, and irrespective of what we know about their profitability and whether they are subsidizing or not the tokens that we buy, who knows? But in any case, any business wants to increase their revenues. So what are the options that they can take? So either you acquire new customers so that they start to use their system, or they can also entice existing customers to use their systems more. Now, if we look at this, any online business will testify that acquiring new customers is really expensive. If you are thinking about existing customers, you can pull two levers. One is that you could make the system more useful. For example, you had the website, and then you had the CLI coding tools, and now you have these work applications, right, that integrate with your desktop applications. So that's one way to get your existing users use your systems more. And then we have to realize that it's also very expensive because you have to build all those new capabilities. But the alternative is just pump out more output. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to build anything. You can just churn out more tokens, and it's not very difficult. You can make small changes the way you do the post-training. You can make changes to the system prompt, and voila, the LLM will output a lot more tokens. The number of output tokens that the AI lab would be selling is the number of users times the number of requests those users make, and then the number of output tokens that are generated for each of those requests. So you have many users, you take one user, the user will be giving many requests to the system, and for each of those requests you will deliver a big packet of tokens to the user. It's expensive to increase the number of users, it's expensive to increase the number of requests, but it's cheap to just churn out more tokens for each request. Now, am I imagining this, or is this really happening? Here are some stats, and I know these are very insignificant because this is literally one request, but let's just contemplate this chart for a moment. This was around the time when we had the Axios breach, and this was also the time when ChatGPT 5.4 came out, and then eventually a few weeks later 5.5. And what I observed, and another video already talks about, is that 5.0 and 5.2 in my practice were really good models. They were predictable as far as LLMs can be predictable. They were boring. They didn't have big ideas. They just did what they were supposed to do. And they didn't blubber a lot. They just gave the code or gave the response. 5.4, 5.3 as well, but it was so bad they pulled it pretty quickly. But 5.4 and 5.5 are now the models that are available, and in fact 5.6 came out recently, not better than 5.5. And what we can see is that the number of tokens for the same request skyrocketed. So on top is the question that I asked each of these models, and I simply grabbed the markdown that they downloaded, and you can see number of bytes, not tokens, but number of bytes were generated. Now, you could say that bytes are not tokens, fair enough, but there is a direct correlation between the two. This is all in English. It's all the same mixture of words. So if we have double the amount of tokens from 5.0 to 5.5, it's pretty much double the tokens as well. The number of tokens go up. 5.2 apparently thought longer. That went up as well. 5.4 was thinking a lot. And then 5.5 is the perfect combination of a lot of tokens very quickly. And that's what you want to have, right? You want to dump a lot of output tokens onto your users in a short amount of time, because that generates you the highest revenue per request. I would highlight that this excludes thinking. Now, what is thinking? Thinking is when the model is talking to itself, right? These models cannot think like people can, but they will have these modes when they are talking to itself. They are giving themselves new instructions, and then they execute those instructions, and eventually they decide, talking to themselves, that, okay, so now we are ready to present to the user, and then you get the 11K. So let's revisit. How do we get the number of output tokens per request? We have the output tokens, those that you actually see. The thinking tokens that you can kind of watch, right? So you can see how they talk to themselves, the LLMs. And then you have the tool tokens. They are probably not that many, but they are still part of the equation. And for example, when it's doing a larger MCP call with a lot of details that go into the MCP, then of course that will count as output tokens as well. So let's just stop here for a moment and think about, how do we define a request? I was vague about this, but let's firm it up a bit. In my view, we could define one request as one goal that we want to achieve, right? So it's one objective that we achieve through one or more prompts. So for example, if I want to find out what was the Axios breach, that would be one request. Or if I want to develop a new feature into the software and I define it, that's another request. So that's what we want to achieve. That's what we as users care about. And that brings us back to the rotten apple question. Because what we as users care about is the correct achievement of the objective. We don't care about prompts really. We don't care about the number of tokens. In fact, we want the fewest possible. What we want is to achieve the objective. And that means the last thing we want is that you tell the AI something and it does something else. What is the killer is rework. And it's also the killer application of the AI labs, that if they have an LLM that is doing something with a lot of tokens and it's wrong, it has to be redone. Brilliant. And so we have to modify our little equation, because what happens is that the number of output tokens per request is the output plus thinking plus tool tokens times rework. How many times do we need to do the same thing over and over until we get the right output, until we get the right result? Now, I have been hitting earlier on OpenAI, so let's be fair and let's look at Anthropic and Claude. This is what Opus 5 told me recently. That is the declared requirement, and it says the opposite of what I built. Now, that is the essence of Rework. Opus 5, one of the newest models, right? Fable 5 is the top. And by the way, I don't see that it's so much better than Opus 5 in actual code delivery. Maybe it can break into other people's computers. I never tried that. But it had the requirements. It found the commit. That data was already there. The requirements were in the documentation. It was told what to do, and it just didn't. What this means, though, is it's not just that it was done badly the first time, but now it has to be disentangled and rebuilt correctly. So that's at least 3 times the amount of work than first time right. If you are an AI business, what do you want to provide your customers? A boring, predictable model like 5.2 codex that we had earlier, which is terse and to the point. It doesn't blubber. It doesn't give you bombastic, nice speeches and pages-long explanations of something that is 2 sentences at most. And it sticks to the scope. It doesn't go do random things. And it's right the first time. Or do you want a slightly unhinged model that talks a lot and very verbose? And it even goes around in the code base to do little bits of here and there that may or may not be in scope or even helpful. And it does more like trial and error. Does it work? Does it not work? Which one is better for you as an AI business? I think it's quite obvious that is the second one, because you are selling tokens. You are not selling results. You are not selling successfully achieved objectives. You are not selling successfully achieved goals. You are selling tokens. And therefore, there is actually no commercial reason to get to a really good AI, a perfect AI. What you want to be is roughly at the level that everyone else is. That is not significantly worse so that your existing customers leave you. And you are not so good that you are killing your own token selling business. You have to push many output tokens, and you want to be imperfect so that you get your customers to redo the same thing over and over. Or in the background, your agent would churn on it over and over until it happens to get to the right solution. There is no business reason to give you a perfect AI, first time right, doesn't talk nonsense, just to the point. So what gives? Should we stop using AI altogether? Well, I don't think so. And I am using these things every day, so I'm not going to say that these are all bad. What I'm saying is that when we design our harnesses, when we design our prompts and loops or whatever we are using, we have to be aware of this conflict of interest. We have to try ourselves to design our side of the interface so that it drives the LLMs into being better at first time right, better at being terse. This is not so easy because even if you put this into your agents.md or claude.md file, by the time they have done a few turns, they would have forgotten about it and still give you long responses. So you have to design all the tools and systems that you use on your end to cope with this situation. Now, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you have any comments or thoughts around this current business of AI, please let me know in the comments below. And now enjoy the short sequence generated by Grok, and see you on the next video.
Please like and subscribe.